anymore.
Yeah.
So they're
sleeping.
Yeah, and they're really, I don't even know if they're really truly passed out, but that's neither here nor there. The point is, they're not dead. But people think they're dead. No. That's why we now hear of bottle bombs. Well, I had my stuff in a thing for 3.5 years, and it started up one day. And I sulfited. I stabilized everything. Well, you might have put some stuff in there.
But also, did you sorbate? If you only sulfite, that doesn't count.
Well, that plus a lot of people say, oh, well, you don't really, if I hear people, I had my gravity stay the same for 3 days, so I bottled. Or 3 weeks, or even
3 months. I did that. 3 months.
3 months is, yeah.
My first Mead batch was 3 months, and that was where I ended up with, I popped open a bottle, and they were more of the...
Sprayed it all over the ceiling?
Yeah. No, it hit the table, it hit the carpet, it hit the chair, it hit me, it hit the kitchen floor, and everything between the table and the sink.
Yeah.
Right,
2/3 of the bottle.
I had a raspberry that had been in a bottle for at least 2 years, and I opened it up, sort of fortunately, over the sink. My ceilings are almost 15 feet where the sink is. I've got vaulted ceilings in the house. So it sprayed the ceiling. It was a 500 ml bottle. There was like an inch in the bottom of the bottle when it got done.
Yeah, in my case, that was the third bottle I'd opened because I'd had somebody call me up and tell me, hey, that bottle you gave me is a little bit fizzy. So I'm like, okay, I better do something about that. So I opened the first one and sanitized a chopstick, stuck it in, stirred it until it fizzed, and then stopped, and then stirred it until it fizzed, and then stopped, and then stirred it until it stopped fizzing. And I did that the second bottle, and then the third bottle, I popped it open, and Mead explosion everywhere. So, just because it's 2 bottles in the same batch doesn't necessarily mean they're going to react the same either.
No, because you could end up, if you've got suspended yeast, they could end up mostly in one bottle and not in the other. I mean, it's all the luck of the filler, really.
Which is why when I'm being stupid the smart way, I always have a control bottle, and it's always the one with the lees in it. It's my last bottle, and I put that in either a screw top, a flip top, or one of those taster's corks so that I can check on it just to make sure nothing's going psst.
That's actually a really good idea.
If you're going to be stupid, be smart about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, right. I know. I think that you're creating a control. It's just good science.
That's exactly it. Now, but that is my disclaimer, though. Not just because you think you have a control doesn't necessarily mean it's going to represent the entire batch. Mm-hmm. It should, but it might not always. Just like that one bottle I had that went nuts. Yeah, exactly.
I bottled a batch that I wanted to ferment naturally to make it sparkling, and guess what? half of them blew their tops, and the other half ended up just exactly like I wanted it. And yet I bottled them all out of the same 6-gallon carboy, all in a matter of an hour of each other.
With the same amount of priming in each one, or did you mix the priming in the main batch?
Natural sparkling.
I mixed the prime. Yeah, I mixed the. I didn't even. It was honey, and it was a gravity that I think was at 1003 or something, and so I didn't prime it, and everything came out of the same vessel that it had been in for 2 or 3 months, and so
yes.
Yeah,
we need to talk about fermenting Meads one of these days too.
I know. There's a whole bunch, but my point.
You learn by making mistakes, right?
Don't think that when your yeast tapped out that they died, because they did not die. And if you don't believe me, run a batch until they tap out. Put it in the closet for 6 months, and then add some water and some sugar or honey, or if it had some residual sugar in it, just add some water. You're lowering the ABV, and the yeast will go right back to work.
Yep.
That's proof of it in and of itself right there.
Prove it to yourself.
If you want a less messy proof, you can just go on any Mead Facebook group and go, how many of you had bottles take off when you thought the thing was done? And watch the results pile up, because everybody's had it happen. Everybody.
To be fair, I've never had it happen with a batch that I've stabilized.
Yeah, properly stabilized, though. That's the thing, is that most people don't understand proper stabilization.
Well, in order to stabilize properly, you have to make sure you don't have crap in it.
Yeah.
And you chemically stabilize.
I mean, how many people have you seen say, oh, I cold crashed it and bottled it?
You're an idiot.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a good way to do it. Cold crashing is a great way to settle your lees so you can rack off of it easier. That's fantastic. And
it'll get a lot of yeast out, but it won't get all of them.
It won't. No, it never gets all of them. So yeah, I mean, pretty much the only way you can guarantee. Well, actually, I don't think there is a way you can guarantee all the yeast get out. But yeah, if you do a good job of settling.
You have a cross-flow filter that you spent $30,000 on.
Yeah. Well, okay, if you're at the professional level, yeah, you could probably get away with that. But even that, and this is what's really interesting. I had a conversation with Pete once, and he had tried like 30 different meads, and he said less than a third of them were properly stabilized.
I believe it, because people don't understand it's pH dependent.
Yeah, there's so many variables,
and they don't understand the binding process.
Yeah.
Right.
It's, I love the rousing the yeast thing is something not a lot of people realize. So I put a link to that in the page so that people could go read more about it.
Also on Godmead, check out some of the stir plate experiments where people have just left their meat on the stir plate for the entire time. That pretty much works out to the same thing. You've got constant degassing going on, and when you at the beginning you crank it up so you've got constant aeration going on, and then once you don't need the aeration anymore, you turn it down a little bit, so you're just getting constant degassing. And then once you don't really need to be degassing anymore, then you're just stirring the lees. And yeah, everybody who's used that says that they'd had really good drinkable batches within a month or so. That took a lot less time than that same recipe would have if they'd just done it their standard way.
Well, and you remember way back when, before we started using fancy stuff like stir plates, a lot of people were just taking aquarium stones. Aquarium air stones and putting 2 or 3 of those on the bottom and just let them bubble away, and they just kept things moving. So the same effect, but it was it was a cheapy way to do it, because I remember we used to argue over what kinds of air stones were the best ones. Yeah, I mean, it was hilarious. We'd have whole conversations around brands and types of air stones and what shape was the best. And it was like, oh my god, really? We were really into it. But
why don't we? I expect we've got some questions that have been asked tonight.
Mainly commentary off of the off of the conversation where you spun off.
Joe Brazo is asking before stabilizing, should you take the pH to decide how much to add?
There you go.
Well,
missed that one.
You have to if you truly want to make it stable. But if you're talking about let's define some terms here first. If you're talking about the first time that you add sulfites, which most people call stabilizing it, meaning my fermentation is over and now I want to add some sulfite and sorbate, you can indeed get by with adding the 1/4 teaspoon for your 5 or 6 gallon carboy. But the reason that is only partially true is because it's pH dependent. Let me see here real quick. I'm looking at a chart, and if your pH of your wine is, number one, we want to have 50 parts per million to stabilize. And when we say stable, it means that it's 2 things. There's enough sulfite or sulfur in your yeast that it's going to stop oxidation. And I've been one that have advocated forever that you don't really have to worry about meads oxidizing, and I only found out about 3 months ago that alcohol itself, ethanol, oxidizes with oxygen. So if you want to stop that process from happening and make it so that bugs cannot overtake and infiltrate your mead, you need to be at 50 parts per million, and there's actually a more accurate way, but we're not going to get into that tonight. Here's the difference. If your pH is 3.6, and you've added X amount of SO2, the 1/4 of teaspoon per 6 gallons, you're at the 50 parts per million. But if you went to 3.7, you're almost 15. Just by moving that 1 point, you're already 15 parts per million in the red. So what I'm trying to show you here, that pH makes a huge difference in where it's really, is it truly stabilized, meaning is it going to have enough, and these are free SO2 points too. So if you had 60, or if you had 50 points, 50 parts per million into the batch for the very first time, if your pH is over 3.6, you already haven't added enough. And that's if you could imagine that all of what you added stayed free and available to go to work later in your must. But when you just added it in there 2 days later, you go back and you measure it, and you've probably got only about 20 parts per million in there that are actually available to do their work. Imagine this. Imagine if you went in a round room and there were people shoulder to shoulder in the round room all the way around the walls, from one end all the way around, a complete circle. But part of those guys, everybody's hands were behind their back. Part of them are handcuffed to the walls, and part of them are not handcuffed to the walls. And now you say, okay, you guys that are free, you step forward. The guys that are not handcuffed to the walls, that can move around, those are the guys that can run over and put a fire out next door. Or they can go kill a snake infestation that's climbing through the gutters in the sidewalk. But the guys that are handcuffed, they're bound. They can't get free to go do anything else because they're already handcuffed. They're bound to other ingredients in the must. So the very first time, which most people say I stabilized, what they're referring to is the first time that they added any sulfur to their mead. And most of that gets bound the first time you add it anyway. Now, and then also it's pH dependent. So I don't know if I just answered our question correctly in a way that whoever posed that question, I hope you understand it's dependent on your pH, and it's also dependent on how many of the parts per million are free and not handcuffed to the wall.
Okay. Bobby Slants is asking who published the chart. He'd like to look it up. I would like to put it as a link, too. Do you remember where the chart is?
Sure. It's, Shea Comfort wrote it, and it's called SO2 Management, and you can find it at morewine.com.
Okay, SO2 Management. All right, got it.
Yeah. And like I said, Tom Repus I talked to him a couple days ago, and probably not next week, but I think maybe the following week, we're going to devote an entire show to SO2 management because there's so many misconceptions about it. It's really important. And if you're planning on drinking your mead within maybe 6 or 8 months of pitch, then you might not have to concern yourself too much about it. But if you want to put that stuff down and have it even last for a couple of years in a bottle, if you're not, and I understand some people don't want to, too many people think they're allergic to sulfur when they're not. Other people say, oh, well, I don't want to use chemicals. It's a natural occurring chemical, and if you ate anything today from the store, you've already ingested a whole bunch of it, and unless you're sitting at home tonight with the migraine splitting your head open, you're not allergic to it. And so it's really such a cheap insurance policy to give our meads a chance to grow old and age gracefully and to not have any issues. And it's a little bit in-depth. It'll take an entire show, but we will do that soon.
Yeah, we're going to be doing these shows pretty much until the end of our season, which is the end of November, because there's a lot of information. A lot.
Especially if you want to really, dig in and find out the real truth and why.
I've been making mead for 25 years, and I'm taking this all in. I'm learning stuff. There's other things that I'm going, okay, I had no idea. I mean, I was doing the right thing, but now I wouldn't know why, So, and this is good. I mean, you're doing a great job.
Well, thank you. I know that so I own my own business, and I teach people to do what we do for a living. And I have found that if I tell them to do something, but I don't also tell them why, I'll oftentimes find that if they don't know why we do that, there's a good chance when I'm not around, they won't do it anymore because they don't know why we're supposed to do it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.